Please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Everyone tells you that getting old comes with wisdom. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for will treat you like a burden. Like a relic from a time they'd rather forget. I gave up everything for my son, worked 3 jobs after his father died, went hungry so he could eat, sold my mother's wedding ring to get him through college. So you can imagine the betrayal. When the woman he married, the one I welcomed into my home, cooked for, helped raise their child, stood in front of me with curled lips and hissed, "You old witch. I only put up with you because of my husband." That moment changed everything. And she had no idea at all, who she had just called a witch. Let me tell you what happened next. It was a chilly Tuesday morning, and I was in the kitchen, doing what I'd done every morning for the past year, preparing tea and breakfast before my son, Francis, left for work. I always made 2 cups, one for him, one for Tessa, his wife. Not because she ever thanked me, but because it was the right thing to do. Tessa never liked me. I knew that. She never said it out loud, until today. Before, it was always in the way she rolled her eyes when I walked into the room, how she'd whisper into her phone whenever I came near, how she never once asked if I needed help or rest. But I kept going. Because that's what mothers do. This morning, I was a little late coming downstairs. My knees had flared up from the cold, and I hadn't slept well. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I heard them talking in the kitchen. No, talking isn't the right word. Mocking. God, Francis. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, Tessa snapped. She walks around this house like she owns it. She does own it, Francis muttered. At least until we get her to transfer it. I froze. Transfer, what? I mean it, Tessa hissed. She's ancient. All she does is make tea and cry about the past. I only put up with that old witch because of you. Once the house is ours, I want her gone. I felt something twist in my chest. Not just pain, betrayal. Sharp and raw, like a wound torn open. She must have sensed me there, because a moment later, Tessa turned around and saw me. She didn't even flinch. No shame. No apology. Just that cold, cruel smirk I'd seen on her face 1,000 times but ignored. "Morning," she said, her tone like ice. Then, louder, with venom. "You old witch. I only put up with you because of my husband." Francis stood behind her, frozen like a boy caught in a lie. He didn't defend me. Didn't say a word. I looked at my son. Then I looked at her. And I smiled. Because if Tessa thought I was just a tired, weak old woman she could bully out of her own home, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I've kept secrets longer than she's been alive. And I'm about to show them both. I may be old, but I am far from done. They thought I'd break. After all, I was just the old woman in the guest room, right? The woman who made their meals and quietly paid the electric bill when they forgot. The woman who raised their son when they went on vacation and offered my pension when Francis lost his job last year. But Tessa calling me a witch, oh, that unlocked something she was never prepared for. I went back to my room that morning without a word. Closed the door softly. Sat down in my rocking chair and stared out the window, sipping my tea like nothing had happened. Because that's the thing about women like me, we've lived through wars, funerals, and famine. We know when to speak, and when to plan. That night, I pulled out the red envelope. It was tucked inside my old sewing box, hidden beneath fabric scraps no one ever touched. Inside was my original will, the one where everything, including the house, my savings, and my pension fund, went to Francis and any future grandchildren. Not anymore. I spent the next morning with my lawyer, a kind man named Mr. Ikenna who'd known my late husband. "I'm ready to amend my will," I said calmly. He raised an eyebrow. "What changed?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Let's just say, I've seen people's true colors. It's time to protect what I worked for." We removed Francis and Tessa as beneficiaries. I redirected my assets to a trust fund in the name of my granddaughter, Debbie. The house would remain in my name for as long as I lived. No transfers. No claims. And should anything suspicious happen to me, Mr. Ikenna would launch an automatic investigation with the help of his private estate firm. That evening, I returned home. Quiet as usual. I made dinner. Set the table. Watched them eat while pretending I didn't see Tessa's mocking smile or Francis's awkward glances. She thought she'd won. She didn't know. I'd just declared a silent war. A week passed. Then two. Tessa's tone got sharper, more confident. She started leaving property brochures around the house. Talking loudly on the phone about renovations, once the transfer clears. She was counting down to my exit. That's when I started leaving crumbs. Little hints. I casually mentioned over breakfast that I'd been to the lawyer's office, just updating old documents. I began locking my bedroom door. And one night, I left my will, a fake version, on my desk and left the door ajar. Tessa found it. I made sure of it. And like a greedy vulture, she took pictures. She thought she had the upper hand. But I was watching from the hallway mirror the whole time. 3 days later, I hosted a family dinner. Just us. Debbie was upstairs asleep. I served Tessa's favorite, okra stew and pounded yam, just like she liked it. Halfway through, I looked up and said, I made a few changes to my will. Wanted to be transparent. Tessa stiffened. Oh. That's generous, Francis said, confused. Tessa cleared her throat. We actually found the document. You must have left it out. Oh really? I smiled. Well then you saw the clause about the early inheritance. She leaned forward. What clause? Oh, the one where any beneficiary found to be pressuring or abusing me becomes automatically disqualified. Her face turned white. Francis blinked. Wait, what? I dropped my smile. And everything gets locked for 10 years if there's any sign of coercion or manipulation. I looked her dead in the eye. So I'd be very careful how you speak to me going forward. Or I'll report your threats, and you'll be left with nothing. Silence. Then I stood, gathered my plate, and walked away. She called me a witch. She should have remembered. Witches don't die easy. We hex quietly. With pen, paper, and patience. I never raised my voice. Not once. But the entire house had shifted. The air was heavy. Tessa avoided me now, but not out of respect, out of fear. She didn't know what I truly knew, yet. Francis was distant, buried in confusion. I could tell he didn't know whether to defend his wife or question her. But he said nothing. Which was worse than betrayal, it was cowardice. Debbie, however, noticed everything. She was just 6 years old, but that child had her father's eyes and her grandfather's quiet strength. She'd sit with me on the porch in the evenings, her little legs swinging beneath the bench, watching the birds in the hibiscus trees. One night, she looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, why doesn't Mommy like you?" I froze. I'd spent my whole life protecting people, especially Frances. But I was not about to plant hatred in a child's heart. Not even for her own mother. So I bent down, brushed her braids behind her ears, and whispered, "Some people only see what they want. But your job, baby, is to always look deeper." She blinked slowly, then gave a small nod, like she understood something no 6-year-old should. The very next day, my plan fell into place, sooner than I expected. I had forgotten my reading glasses in the kitchen. When I came back to get them, I heard whispers behind the door. "Tessa and her sister." "She's bluffing," her sister hissed. "Old people always make threats when they feel cornered." "No, I saw the lawyer's name on the envelope." "She changed it, I know it." Tessa snapped back. "Then you need to do something fast. Before she croaks and locks that money up forever." I stepped away quietly. That was all the proof I needed. That night, I called Mr. Ikenna. "I need to record a statement. I want it stored with the will." He agreed. The next day, I sat in his office and detailed everything: the threats, the emotional mistreatment, the eavesdropped conversation. I even named Tessa's sister. "Are you sure?" he asked as he ended the recording. "This will escalate things if it's ever needed." I smiled grimly. "I want it to. If they make a move, I want the fire to be ready." He nodded. "Then it's done." When I got home, I found the locks on my bedroom door broken. My drawers rummaged through. The envelope with the fake will gone. I almost laughed. I let them steal exactly what I wanted them to find. I went straight to the kitchen where they sat, pretending to be sipping tea like nothing happened. "Did you two go through my things?" I asked. Tessa smirked. "Don't be paranoid. Maybe you misplaced something." "Ah," I said simply. "Well, I hope whoever found it enjoys their inheritance." She blinked. I decided to leave the house, to someone else entirely. Now her face paled. "To who?" she asked quickly. I smiled. "To someone who actually sees me." That's when little Debbie skipped into the room. Tessa's eyes flicked between us. She'd just realized Debbie had replaced her. And there was nothing she could do about it, not without exposing her own crimes. She thought I was old and fading. But she didn't know. I had the patience of time. And the power of legacy. After that night, the house felt like a battlefield. But I didn't raise any alarms. Why would I? The most dangerous wars are won in silence. Tessa stopped smiling. She tiptoed around me like I might explode at any moment. Her voice, once loud and commanding, had shrunk to a sharp whisper behind closed doors. And Francis, well, he buried himself deeper in his phone and work, pretending not to see his marriage cracking like ice under heat. They both thought they still had time. They didn't. One Thursday afternoon, I invited a few of my old witch friends over for tea. Tessa laughed under her breath when I mentioned it, but she didn't know what that gathering really was. It was a meeting of legends. Adiz, retired magistrate. Mrs. Akand, former property lawyer. Yvonne ran one of the biggest private security firms before retirement. And me? I was just the glue that held secrets together. We sipped our tea while Debbie sat at the side with her picture book, humming to herself. I leaned in and told them everything. Not in a panic. Not with fear. Just the truth. They each listened carefully. Then Adiz leaned back and said with a soft clap of her hands, "Well, that girl doesn't know whose roof she's under." Mrs. Akand nodded, already pulling out her notepad. "Let's draft something stronger. A clause that gives Debbie protective custody of the estate until she's 18, with oversight from the trust. And Yvonne?" She smiled coldly and handed me a small black card. "I have a private investigator. If you need to gather hard proof, they're invisible." The war wasn't mine alone anymore. That night, I left the card in my drawer, right on top of my Bible. I didn't need it yet. Instead, I used a different weapon: love. I spent time with Debbie. Taught her how to braid, bake, and fold letters like her grandfather used to. Every laugh from that child was another wall of defense around my soul. She was the reason I hadn't walked away yet. She was the reason I was fighting. And she noticed. "Grandma," she said one night while brushing my hair, "you're like a queen. But nobody knows it." I hugged her tightly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's the best kind of queen. The kind nobody sees coming." But it wasn't long before Tessa struck back. One Sunday morning, I overheard her on the phone, again. "No," I checked. She changed it. "I need you to come by and talk some sense into her. If she won't listen, maybe she needs a reminder of who's boss." A reminder? Is that what she thought she was? I didn't interrupt. I waited. Because what came next would be her undoing. That evening, I baked her favorite again. Sweet plantain pie. Only this time, I wrote a little note and tucked it under her plate. It read, "You keep threatening a woman with nothing left to lose. That's not courage, it's stupidity. Try me again." The witch. When she found it halfway through her second bite, she turned pale. She looked up, sweat beading on her brow, and I just smiled sweetly over my fork. And whispered, "I saw you on the phone." She stood so quickly, her chair toppled over. But she couldn't say a thing. Not in front of Francis. Not in front of Debbie. Not in front of the woman who had prepared every counterstrike 3 months ago. Tessa wanted to call me a witch. Then let her feel the magic of consequences. The following week, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Tessa stopped speaking to me entirely. Not a single fake, "Good morning," not even a scowl. Just silence. Her way of pretending I no longer existed. But she knew I was there. And I wanted her to know. Every morning I brewed 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for her, left steaming on the counter with a small folded napkin beside it that simply read, "From the witch." She never drank it. But the steam always faded into the air, reminding her I was still watching. Still listening. Still calculating. One evening, just after sunset, Debbie came running into the kitchen, tears clinging to her lashes. Daddy yelled at Mommy. He said she was being ungrateful and that Grandma never deserved this. "What's happening?" I knelt, wiped her tears, and whispered. "Sometimes people forget who's really been there for them. But you, my angel, will always know." I tucked her into bed with one of her storybooks, an old Yoruba folktale about a cunning tortoise who outwitted every predator, not with strength, but with patience. Downstairs, the real story was unfolding. Francis had found out. Not everything, but enough. Apparently, Tessa had gone behind his back, contacting a shady lawyer to contest the updated will and trust documents I'd crafted with my friends. Francis exploded. This house was her father's. Her legacy. You think you can rewrite history because you married me? I stood outside their door and listened. And for the first time in years, I heard Francis speak with spine. He was no longer the spineless boy I once thought weak for marrying someone so cold. He was a man defending me. I turned and walked away before I could hear Tessa cry. The next day, she knocked on my bedroom door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her posture was stiff. I need a favor. I didn't look up from my sewing. A favor? From the old witch you put up with? She flinched. I was angry. You've been intrusive. And you've been ungrateful. Her nostrils flared. She clearly wasn't used to people denying her. Then she whispered, "It's about Debbie. The school board is threatening suspension over some medical documentation we never submitted. They want a grandparent's affidavit. Francis is too furious to help." I slowly put my sewing down. And smiled. "I'll help." Relief flooded her face. "But on one condition," I added. "You will take Debbie to the community center with me every Sunday. She'll learn where her legacy really comes from." Tessa hesitated. "That place smells like liniment and dust." I didn't blink. "And that dust paid your car note last month." She looked away, and nodded. Later that night, as I folded the affidavit and placed it in an envelope, I smiled. Every step she took toward needing me was another seed sown. Not revenge. Recalibration. I wasn't just haunting her conscience, I was rewiring it. And as I lay in bed that night, I opened a drawer and took out a tiny cassette recorder. The same one I'd used when I overheard her call me a witch. I had recordings. Receipts. Enough to raise her social life, her fake parenting blog, and even her standing in Francis's workplace if I ever needed them. But I hadn't used them. Not yet. Because sometimes, power is best served cold, and worn like a crown. It was a crisp Thursday morning when the letter came. A simple ivory envelope, sealed with gold trim, addressed to me in a sharp calligraphy that looked too elegant to belong to a bill. I opened it slowly. It was from my late husband's attorney. An old clause. One I had forgotten was buried in the estate file, the inheritance test. Apparently, before my husband passed, he had inserted a clause into the family trust, that in the event of generational conflict, Debbie would ultimately decide who gets permanent control of the estate. Not a judge. Not Francis. Debbie. My eyes widened. She had to be of speaking age, able to communicate clearly, and the final decision would be rendered in front of a court-appointed mediator, not in a courtroom, but in the very house we all lived in. That clause had been left untouched for years because no one thought it would come to this. But now, it was more relevant than ever. I tucked the letter into my Bible. This wasn't just paperwork. This was prophecy. That afternoon, I told Tessa. She scoffed. "So you're putting the fate of $1 million estate into the hands of a 6-year-old who still thinks unicorns are real?" "She also thinks you love her," I replied softly. "So maybe you should be careful about what illusions you want to break." She stared at me. Pale. I smiled. This isn't about money anymore. It's about legacy. She knows who tucks her in, who reads her stories, who bakes her pancakes when she's scared at night. You're poisoning her against me, she snapped. No, I said calmly. I just stopped letting you poison her idea of me. There's a difference. The day of the mediation arrived. We sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through the blinds. The mediator, a calm woman in her 50s named Ms. Abiola, took a seat at the center. Debbie sat between Tessa and me, holding her doll in one hand, clutching a note I had helped her write in the other. Debbie, Ms. Abiola said gently, we're all here because we want to understand what you want. Who makes you feel safe? Who you trust to take care of your memories and this home? Tessa jumped in quickly, her voice sickly sweet. Baby, remember how I... Debbie turned to her and blinked. Then, slowly, handed her the note. The mediator took it and read aloud. Dear everyone, I love my daddy and mommy. But I feel most safe when Grandma is there. She knows all the old stories. She talks to the house like it's alive. She says it remembers me too. I want Grandma to stay here forever. Please let her be the boss. Love, Debbie. Tessa's jaw slackened. Her hands shook. And Francis? He closed his eyes. Not in shame, but in acceptance. By nightfall, the mediator made it official. I would serve as legal steward of the estate and all decisions regarding Debbie's education, healthcare, and the home's future. Tessa didn't speak to me for 3 days. On the 4th day, she came downstairs quietly and found me on the porch. She looked older now. Smaller. Do you hate me? She asked, barely audible. I sipped my tea and said nothing. Then, softly, I don't waste time hating broken people. I just stop letting them break others. Tessa wiped a tear. I want to be better. I don't want her to grow up, remembering me like this. Then stop talking, I said, and start showing. The witch they feared had done her job. Not with curses. Not with hexes. With memory. With love. With legacy. Sometimes, revenge isn't a blade in the dark, it's a light in the attic, showing all the cobwebs you thought no one noticed. And I was done dusting. 6 months later, the house was quieter, but not empty. Laughter returned. Not the loud, forced kind that echoed through parties and polite family dinners, but the soft, honest kind, the kind that lingered in the halls like perfume. Debbie's drawings were now framed in the study. She'd started calling it our house, not Mommy's house anymore. One Saturday afternoon, I found her kneeling in the garden, whispering to the flowers. Grandma, she said when I stepped outside, do you think the roses can hear me? I nodded. They listen better than most grown-ups. She giggled and got back to watering. Behind her, the old tree I'd planted when I first arrived in this home had bloomed again, for the first time in 7 years. Deep red flowers, like blood and wine. I called it the witch's tree now. Not in shame, but in honor. Tessa stayed. That surprised me. But something about the process cracked her open just enough for light to get in. She started taking therapy seriously. Took a job, not because she had to, but because she wanted to feel useful beyond her husband's shadow. She even apologized. Once. Quietly. Like the words scared her. I accepted it. Not because I forgot what she said that night, but because I had become too powerful for her bitterness to touch. One evening, I stood by the window with my cup of tea, same as always, and watched as Francis helped Debbie ride her new bike down the street. They waved at me. And in that moment, I realized. They hadn't just handed me the house. They had handed me something far greater. Control of the story. No longer the old witch, in whispers and sideways glances. I was the woman who outlived their expectations. The one they underestimated. The one who became legend. And legends. We don't need to be liked. Just remembered.